Okay, good evening and welcome to Axiom Flux, Season 4, Episode 11, the 1st of January 2008. And we're going to be having a chat about the United States federal government shutdown and also about what's going on at the moment in Syria, or we could say Phase 2, perhaps, or whatever. But anyway, I've got a few guests tonight with us. PJ.
Evening.
Good evening, mate. Hope everything's well your end.
Yeah, kind of. Just got a little tangle with some wires. Nothing too much.
Okay, mate. Well, hopefully you'll get that sorted out. And we've got Lopi all the way from the USSA. Evening, Lopi.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, are you doing all right?
Oh, we're all right. The snow is melting. The snow is melting, so I'm happy.
Good, good. We don't want too much of that white stuff. And we also got Patti. I think first comment. Good evening, Patti.
Hey, can you hear me?
Good evening.
Hi there. Hey, I'm on, but I might have to be silent here or there. It's just me and my daughter home, and I've got a little music on for her, and I am working a little, but I feel like I've been missing out. So here I am. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, that's okay. You're more than welcome. And yeah, you multitasking. You women are very good at it. So yeah, pop in now and then if you want to say something. I'll ask for your input at times. And if you're too busy and you don't come back, quite understandable. But please just if you're interested and you've got something to say. So anyway, welcome to Axiom Flux. Okay, well, let's kick off, and I'm going to do a screen share. Hopefully it's going to work. And hopefully it don't clash too much with your article, PJ. But it's just the... if we can get onto it. Ta-da! Good old wiki. Well, if no one's aware or if they've not been asleep for the past 2 or 3 days, I'm sure that you're aware. Even if you're only remotely in contact with what's going on in the news, even the mainstream, you'll know about the United States federal government shutdown. And yes, first time for quite a while, I think. Or is it first time ever? Anyway, it says here, shutdown of the United States federal government began at midnight EST on Saturday, January the 20th, 2018, after a failure to pass a relevant legislation funding bill for government operations and agencies. This stemmed from disputes over the status of persons affected by the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals immigration policy, and therefore, therefore, whether those covered under the program should face deportation or have a path to permanent resident or citizenship. There was also a dispute over whether funding should be allocated towards building a Mexico-United States border wall, a keystone policy during Donald Trump's presidential campaign. This is the first shutdown in United States history to occur while both chambers of Congress, as well as the White House, are controlled by the same party, in this case, the Republicans. The shutdown began when the Democrats voted to filibuster the continuing resolution which requires a supermajority to end. One-party funding lapses have occurred previously, but did not result in the federal government's function shutting down. The shutdown began on the first anniversary of Donald Trump's taking office. The rest of it you can read yourself on there about the background and shutdown, etc. So I won't go into it. But most people know more about it than I do. Would be an interesting topic.
Well, yes, it's a double-edged sword.
Yes, Lopi.
Well, the reason is, if I'm correct, what they're trying to do is deport everybody regardless of, of anything. age, you know, whether they were criminals or not. And, you know, I think I saw an article before, and there was a grown man who had a family who came here with his parents when he was like 3 years old, and he grew up. He has never been a criminal, no criminal record or anything. Went to school, went to uni, has a family, and is now being deported. You know, that's not right. I can understand. I mean, he's paid taxes through his whole life. You know, he was on the up and up. The only thing he didn't have was a paper saying he was a Yank. You know, he did everything else proper. Granted, it was, I don't know how he could do it, but he did it. And
so what? So does he come under what they're calling illegal alien?
yes, by
So-
law, he's an illegal alien.
Right. So he didn't have the infamous or famous working permit then.
No, he came when he was like 3 years old with his parents. And his parents obviously were migrant workers or something. And because a lot of people they allow migrant workers to do, you know, farming and stuff for a short period of time, and then they're supposed to leave. Some of them don't leave. And
So if he paid tax then, so if I interject a bit quick, Lopi, did actually pay tax, that must have meant he had a national insurance number, yeah?
I don't know how, but obviously, because if he's illegal, yeah, I don't know how he did that, because the article did not say anything about how he got a social security number or if he did. But, you know, he paid his taxes, and you know, he did everything legally, other than the fact that originally he's not illegal. I mean, originally he was illegal, but everything else he was on above the table. So, you know, that's why I say it's a double-edged sword. You've got criminals, people who are doing bad things all the time, and you've got people doing good things and not causing problems. You know, the first thing you should do is get rid of the bad guys. You've got a record of them. Send them back. Make the prisons in jails less full from the people that shouldn't be here in the first place. You know, send them back to wherever they came, and then think about the people that are doing things that are good. You know, they're not disrupting the neighborhoods. They're a benefit to the community, and perhaps give them a chance to become a citizen. I mean, he only thing I see wrong with the whole thing of that man was he had a lot of time to become a citizen. He should have taken that opportunity to become a legal citizen, because it's not hard. I'm a legal citizen of the United States, but granted, because I was adopted at birth, I didn't have to go through all the major tests. You know, when I was 5, I was naturalized, and I went into court, and they were like, "Okay, you're now a Yank. You know, on paper, you're a Yank on paper. You know, got my citizenship." But they were like, you know, it's a bit different when you're a child than when you're an adult, I suppose, because you've got to take these tests. You know, why you have to take a test? It's just like in England. You know, you take a test for British nationality or citizenship. You got to know a little bit about, you know, the Tower Bridge. Why do people call it the Tower Bridge? Well, because there's a bloody tower on it, and the end of it was, you know, the tower. You know, where I don't know how to explain it. It's there. I mean, what's the difference between Tower Bridge and London Bridge? Well, London Bridge has been rebuilt, you know, and it's ugly. But
well, I think we said it. I think we sold the original London Bridge to our American cousins over there.
yes, I believe it's in Pennsylvania now.
That's right. Well, listen, I'm not fully up on the whole of this. I mean, some people say, well, it's just the Democrats and the so-called deep state and the globalists just chucking things in the way and trying to get the Trump administration, obviously including Trump, out of office, and that's a bit more in with their liking. I mean, you know, probably why I think they would take any excuse, the Democrats, to get rid of any Republican president, no matter who he is. That's just politics and the way. And I'm a political atheist, so.
I agree with you. I think partially, I think it's a lot of the Democrats wanting to get rid of Trump, and it's a lot of the let's throw some salt in some wounds, you know. But a lot of things that we're going to see against, as far as government goes, is against Trump and trying to stop any progress that he's trying to create.
Well, at the end of the day, I guess really, you know, he was elected regardless whether it was the popular vote or the college vote or whatever you want to call it, and whether it was fixed or it wasn't fixed or they tried to fix it. I mean, at the end of the day, he was into office, and there he is. He's been the president for a year. As much as, like I say, I'm a political atheist. We have the same over here. We're prime ministers and all the rest of the battle, whatever you want to call it. I think if you're going to make a political argument about it all, that means you believe in politics. Then I suppose you better stick to the rules of the political game and do it, you know, by the rule of law at least. Or if they keep quoting the rule of law, then you've got to stay within the rules of politicking to put a case to perhaps, you know, wait another 4 or 5 years and get him out of office, because that's the way it rumbles. All of this impeachment malarkey, you know.
Give him a chance.
You know,
give him a chance, yeah. You know. But he's not being given a chance. From day one, it's all I've heard over here is Hillary was a goddess, Obama was a saint, and Trump is the devil incarnate. And that's all I've heard since Trump's been, you know, put in office. And people fail to realize that he won the electoral vote. He won the vote. Clinton would have made this country a lot worse, and she would have blamed somebody else or not know anything about it all of a sudden, like she's forgotten so many times. Obama would have continued to segregate everybody.
Well, he was good at thinking. Like I say, I have an interest. I don't so much like geopolitics, but unfortunately, if you don't want much to do with it, you are involved because of events that happen from this. And what the second tonight is the unfolding situation as we speak. So you have to be involved because you are involved, even if you don't vote and you don't want nothing to do with the political systems. It is, but
A lot of people don't realize that when you don't vote, your vote automatically goes to majority.
the tacit consideration, isn't it, where they vote for you. But again, I mean, how undemocratic is that?
Well,
So I mean, and the fact that we have this is over here for political parties, and if you don't toe the party line, they withdraw the RIP, and actually, you can face being chucked out altogether. So I mean, how democratic is that? It's hogwash, really. But anyway, let me hang on a minute, Lopi. I'll just see. I just thought I'd bring PJ in because I think he might have an article to sort of.
No, well, can give it a go.
Yeah.
What I've got tonight, Stav, is a Wikipedia page, and it covers the previous shutdown. If you're interested to know some of them.
Far away. I'll put you on share to all. Hang on.
I'll show my screen, and you can present me to everybody then. Yeah.
Yep. Away you go.
All right, you can see that, yeah?
Yep.
Good stuff. Okay. This list includes only funding gaps that led to actual employee furloughs. Not all funding gaps have led to shutdowns. Even after the civility opinions of 1980 and 1981, for example, a brief funding gap in 1982 did not involve furloughs, with non-essential workers told to report to work but to cancel meetings and not perform their ordinary duties. A 3-day funding gap in November 1983 reportedly led to no disruptions in government services, and in 1984 it was considered rare for a funding gap to cause federal employees to be actually ordered to cease work. So in 1980, on May the 1st, the Federal Trade Commission was shut down for 1 day after Congress failed to pass an appropriations bill for the agency. It occurred just days after the issuance of Civility's opinion on April the 25th. This was the first time a federal agency shut down due to a budget dispute. Federal marshals were deployed to some FTC facilities to enforce the shutdown. 1,600 workers were furloughed, and the shutdown cost $700,000. In 1981, on November 23rd of 1981, 241,000 federal employees were furloughed for 1 day. The shutdown occurred because President Ronald Reagan vetoed a spending bill that contained a smaller set of spending cuts that he had proposed. The shutdown was estimated to cost taxpayers $80 to $90 million in back pay and other expenses. Not all government departments shut down during the funding gap. 1984. On October the 4th, just 500,000 federal employees were furloughed for 1 afternoon. This shutdown occurred due to the inclusion of a water projects package and a civil rights measure that Reagan opposed. The bill was passed the following day after Congress removed these programs, and also included a compromise on funding of the Nicaraguan Contras. The shutdown only covered 9 out of the 13 appropriations bills that had not been passed at that point. Back pay was estimated at $65 million. 1986. On October the 17th, 1986, 500,000 federal employees were furloughed for 1 afternoon over a wide range of issues. The cost was estimated at $62 million in lost work. 1990. The 1990 shutdown occurred over Columbus Day weekend. From Saturday, October the 6th through Monday, October the 8th, the shutdown stemmed from the fact that a deficit reduction package negotiated by President George H. W. Bush contained tax increases. despite his campaign promise of "read my lips, no new taxes," leading to a revolt led by House Minority Whip Newt Gingrich that defeated the initial appropriations package. Because the shutdown occurred over a weekend, the effects of the shutdown were lessened, with the national parks and the Smithsonian museums being the most visible closures. Around 2,800 workers were furloughed, with the government losing $2.57 million in lost revenue and back wages. In 1995 to 96, the two shutdowns of 95 and 96 were the result of conflicts between Democratic President Bill Clinton and the Republican Congress over funding for Medicare, education, the environment, and public health in the 1996 federal budget. The government shut down after Clinton vetoed the spending bill the Republican Party-controlled Congress sent him. Government workers were furloughed and non-essential services suspended during November 14th to the 19th. In 1995 and from December the 16th, 1995 to January the 6th, 1996, for a total of 27 days. The major players were President Clinton and Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Newt Gingrich. The first of the two shutdowns caused the furlough of about 800,000 workers, while the second caused about 284,000 workers. Over to 2013 now. The 2013 shutdown lasted 17 days, during October the 1st to the 16th. And during the shutdown, approximately 800,000 federal employees were indefinitely furloughed, and another 1.3 million were required to report to work without known payment dates. The deadlock centered on the Continuing Appropriations Resolutions 2014. The Republican-led House of Representatives, in part encouraged by conservative senators such as Ted Cruz and conservative groups such as Heritage Action, offered several continuing resolutions with language delaying or defunding the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which is commonly known as Obamacare. The Democratic-led Senate passed several amended continuing resolutions for maintaining funding and then current sequestration levels with no additional conditions. Political fights over this and other issues between the House on one side and President Barack Obama and the Senate on the other. It led to a budget impasse which threatened massive disruption. Late in the evening of October the 16th, 2013, Congress passed the Continuing Appropriations Act 2014. And the President signed it shortly after midnight on October the 17th, ending the government shutdown and suspending the debt limit until February the 7th, 2014. And the most recent one, the 2018 shutdown, began at 12 a.m. EST time on the January 20th of this year, 2018. And this was the first time a government shutdown took place with the House, Senate, and executive branch being controlled by one party. Senate Democrats voted against funding the federal government because it did not include Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA legislation. Republicans had injected funding for Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, in such a deal instead, but Democrats refused to accept the deal. Back over to you, Stav.
Yeah, well, obviously, it's not the. I've learned a bit tonight. Like I say, I'm not a well up on this information of shutdowns, and I'm not, to be honest, I'm not really sure how the Republic works with its Congress and Senate and President and all the rest of it, because it is a republic at the end of the day. It's not like a constitutional monarchy here with a parliament, and that's complicated enough. So yes, it's obviously not the first time. It seems to me like it's within a couple of weeks. It'll all be forgotten. The Federal Reserve will issue a load more numbers off their central computer base or algorithms, whatever they use in the modern banking world today, to keep the fiat Keynesian Ponzi scheme going. So it'll all be it cannot, you know, the fact that if you understand a debt economy, that without debt you won't have an economy, which is crazy. If you understand that, then you know that this is all just nonsense, isn't it? Really, at the end of the day, because all they got to do is press a button. It's sorted out within a few seconds, basically, and that's what they do all the time. It seems to me that they, it's no big deal. As much as what some people might say, oh my God, the government's been shut down. Well,
government shutdown is another term used for when two branches of the government come to an impasse. In case you don't know what an impasse means, it means when they can't come to a civilized meeting of the minds. One wants one thing, one wants another, and nobody agrees. And unfortunately, at this point, we are the topic is the DACA, DACA, the whole immigrating children or illegal children and their families, illegals, because the president is trying to shut down on what illegals we have in the country now, in order to minimize the amount that keep coming in.
I don't know. You mean like they can't reach a bipartisan agreement across the
exactly.
So, well,
it's not. I don't know why they can't come up with an agreement for it, because it seems rather simple, really. Shut the border for like 6 months or so, reform your country, sort it out, and then open your border again. It seems quite simple.
Does America need immigration because they don't have the workers in America now? I mean, that might be a bit of a
I don't know if Patty will agree, being I assume she's in America, but I don't know if any other person in America would agree. But I think that if forced, okay, I have to go backtrack a little. I may be a bit biased, or maybe rude for that matter, but I think America as a whole is rather lazy in comparison to countries all over the world. I traveled all over the world all my life, so I've seen a lot of how necessity creates people to become more motivated in creating and farming and doing things. Americans as a whole, somebody else will do it. I've got bigger fish to fry, but give me what I want. That's the mentality you get on a daily basis here. And if you didn't have the migrant workers, it would force Americans to do the jobs that are necessary to keep the country working, to do things. But because they don't want to do it, because they don't want to work the sewers, because they don't want to work in the fields, they have to get workers and people from other countries. Now, America is a much bigger continent, or not continent, but piece of land than England. American can afford to have the farming. We don't need to import our vegetables, but 75% of our vegetables are imported because we don't want to do it. And that makes no sense. Now, I can understand a small country with the amount of people that it has cannot produce all the vegetables and foods that it needs to create or to feed all the people. But America can do that. It's got the land, it's got the resources, it's not barren, but it just lacks the people wanting to actually do it. So you need those other people coming in to do the things that Americans don't want to do. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I do see what you're saying, and I think I'm probably being a bit of a devil's advocate this evening, and a naive one on purpose, because I think sometimes you can get a conversation go into the meat of the subject, so to speak. But I mean, I've got my own thoughts about because the UK. We have a very smaller population, but then the land mass is very small. So per capita head, we have less space, much less space than America. We've been having to put up with an open door policy of immigration from all over the continent. And to be perfectly honest, there's no good reason for it other than corporate greed. And that is a consumer society where you don't actually produce anything, but you just consume. They use that as an economic. They use that as an economic figure and say, "Isn't our economy doing very well?" And in actual fact, I would say the same has happened with the United States in the past 20-odd years, or 15 to 20 years, because they've shipped all of their jobs, have they not? Most of the corporations have shipped them over to China. And you've got this problem where, you don't actually have the jobs. To open the doors for immigration for workers when you don't even have the jobs to offer them doesn't make much sense unless you actually just want a society of people who claim benefits and consume.
Well, that's
what's happened here.
We've got problems with, the farmers. I mean, the farmers, we're touching base here with the farmers here. In England, I saw fields and fields of maize. Yes, that's a great resource for the farmer because it's something that's sold and that will keep the family fed. In America, you see fields and fields of soybeans and corn. You don't hardly ever see tobacco. You don't see potatoes unless you're in Idaho. You don't see a lot of other vegetables being produced on the scale that we're consuming because the farmers can't feed their family off of it. We don't see a lot of things being built in America or in England anymore. I mean, where's Rolls-Royce made now? Where's all the British cars being made now? England makes engines. We used to make lots of cars. So did America. We don't make cars. We have factories in America that makes the vents for the cars, but we don't make the car. Why? Because nobody wants to make it anymore. It's too expensive. Well, maybe we should put that money out for one, and maybe the economy will be a bit better. A few years later, we might be hurting in the meantime, but at least we'll be making something on our own. it would be, I don't know how to say it, is we need to go back in time and do what the innovators did. You know, back when Detroit was Detroit and known for the cars, when England was known for, you know, Rolls Royce and Aston Martins and, you know, things that was tangible, that brought pride and everything. Now we just got thousands of people and nothing sustainable.
Well, I think you may have hit the nail on the head a few times there, Lopi, and we did. Yeah, we had a fantastic motorcycle industry, the biggest in the world, and that was a corporate conspiracy that sold it off to the Japanese. Now, the Japanese are the leaders and the world exporters of motorcycles throughout the world, but it used to be Britain, and they that was all carved up by politicians, like they do for their secret or hidden agendas, how they want the country and the world to go. It just happened all by accident. Well, I think you'd have to be asleep to believe that. And I spoke to many American friends over the years in the past 10, 12 years, and earlier on I said, what we have here, they used to say America sneezed and the UK caught a cold, but I had to explain to them. Yeah, well, I explained to him, I said, it's going the other way this time. I said, it won't be long. And he laughed at me at the time. I said that you will have a tax credit type system where you will have the corporations that's left will get away with paying less and less money, and you'll be topped up by government benefits to go and work very long hours for less money. And I said, they are coming for the middle class money, if that's how you want to put it. They'll come for your pensions. They'll come. All of this has happened here long before America, believe it or not. So it was a case of us sneezing and America catching cold, but not because it was planned like that. It's just the way it's turned out. So, you know, a lot of these things you can go and you can do the research and you'll see the reasons why the world, especially America and UK and Europe, has been shaped the way it has been. And it's all a club, and it's all been done by unelected bureaucrats, dictatorial and officials behind the scenes, and NGOs make me laugh. Non-government organisations, yet the place they call the centre of the EU in Brussels, the whole office blocks, it's like a city, is full of NGO offices. Oh, non-government organisations, nothing to do with government, yet the whole place is crammed from top to bottom of these NGOs, which are all doing their own thing to push the agenda for what this whole big push to globalise the world that we're seeing taking place. But they must destroy countries and their sovereignty first to make them all one of the same. But there we are. That's just my research, and I think a few people would agree with me. A few people will disagree with me, but there we are. And I think that's the reason why all these things are turning out like there is. I don't know if Donald Trump is genuine. I don't know if he's not. I don't know whether this deep state really exists. Does it really exist, or is it just a bunch of greedy corporate individuals that want the way they want them to be in their secret societies and all the rest? Perhaps that's what it is. I don't know.
I think this is where Jeff, if he was here, I think this is where he would probably bring up something like, oh, we're all in the matrix now, and we've got to pick the red pill or the blue pill.
Yeah, pretty much. I would agree with that. I
can actually hear Jeff saying that now as we're doing this, even though
well, he's missing that. He needs to wake up. I mean, literally wake up from his subconscious sleep he's having at the moment. But never mind. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if Patty's been listening or whether you're busy or not, Patty. Whether you've got anything to say about what we've talked about so far. Maybe not. That's okay. She'll pop in when she's ready to, I'm sure.
Patty did say
just
she's doing some work on the side, so if she could speak, she did say that she would make a comment. Maybe later on she might pop in.
Okie dokie. Well, is there anything more you want to add to it, PJ? I mean, we could go on for ages and the reasons why or whatever, but we'd start to wane off topic a bit. Well, move off topic a bit, won't we?
We're pretty much halfway through the show anyway, Stav, now, 45 minutes in, so I think we should go on to phase 2 of SYRIA now, if everybody's, ready to move on.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, Lopi, is there anything last you want to say about the government shutdown?
I'm quite interested in the SYRIA part.
Okay.
Well, what I will say, just to
to
finalise the government shutdown, if you're worried that you'll not receive your mail, you still will. You may not get your passports if you're waiting for them. And the army's still out. Any essential service is still going. Whether they get paid for it or not is, questionable. And I think that's all I know about it, really. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, okay then, PJ.
The only thing I do know is, as far as government shutdown, is my dad works as a government contractor. He's a technical writer. He does a lot of the how-to manuals for the government. And I know he was supposed to be going to Florida, and that got cancelled. So I don't know if it had anything to do with all that, but that's my bit.
Well, the airlines, I guess, will be affected to some extent as passports. People won't be receiving them, so there could be some complications with that. But it's not suggesting that it's going to have a serious effect on it, on the immigration. As you did mention, immigration stuff. My feelings is this is really based all about immigration. This is the root cause to it all, is it not? Would you agree?
Well, yes. I mean, there's immigration and there's stupidity. You've got to look at.
Is that yeah?
Well, yeah.
My feelings on it is, for me, immigration. I feel there's more loopholes. There's more, easy access. There's more quick routes and shortcuts if you're coming into the UK. Now, if you're trying to get out of the UK, I think you most people find it really difficult, and I think that is the problem. We hear about, there's too many people coming over to this country. We need to crack down and do this, and we do to a certain extent. But what I think is more important is we should let as people freely leave this prison island, because that's what it's become. I find personally, in my own opinion, it's more difficult for somebody to leave this country than it is to come in.
Well, it is. You're quite right. The other thing is, there's a lot of hype and people's thoughts about how they think the immigration situation is, even in the UK. For a fact, because I've had a relative involved at the moment who's had a hell of a job because he married a Korean wife. He's got a Korean wife. He worked in Korea, and he wanted to come back, and they've got a child. No problem bringing the child in, but we won't go into that. That's to do with English constitutional law. We won't go into that. But to get his wife over, he's had all sorts of problems. It's not an easy thing to do. People make out. And we do still have the asylum seeker route place. People can come in as asylum seekers if they're being persecuted and their lives are in danger. Of course, that should go without saying. So there's a lot of hot air being put out there about it's so easy to get in and this. The only reason why the immigration in the UK has got out of hand is because of the EU policies and open door. That's the stupidity part, I find, of it all. You can't have 1 million or 2 million people per year coming in. It's ridiculous. accountable over 600,000 a year for a tiny little island like this, because it is small, and I don't feel anybody should have to live in a 10 by 10 shipping container. Threats of being called racist or xenophobe and all the rest of it. I think it's just pure nonsense. But anyway, we'll move on. Oh, just one thing to finish. I was safe to say then, PJ and Lopi and Patti, if you're listening, to steal a pun from mainstream media, which I don't really like doing, but this whole shutdown of the United States government is a bit of a nothing burger, PJ.
Yeah, you could say that.
Anyway, so, right, without further ado, we'll move on to the second part of what we're having a chat about tonight. I know these buttons, I've got all these reminders coming up from other things on the internet. Let me share my screen. Nappy. There we are. Right, okay. Let's bring up, this is about no one's aware that Turkey has decided to go into Syria. Yes, it is Syria, into a province called Afrin and also another place called Manjib.
Can I just
which is in the
interject a slight moment, Stav? You'll need to present yourself to everybody and put yourself a box
around. Am I not presented?
No.
Am I not presented? Dreadful of me. Any good now?
There we go. That's fine. I can see you.
PJ. Anyway, where was I? Yes. Well, Erdogan, who's head of the Turkish government, should we say? Anyway, is decided to take action as regards the, as he calls them, terrorist Kurds, or the Kurdish terrorists, the YPG, because he said they're all the same, the Kurds. He doesn't want these terrorist cells, as he calls them, PKK, YPG, and other factions to be on the Turkish border, interrupting Turkey and promoting the PKK within Turkey to form their own Kurdish state within Turkey, or on the border, or anywhere else near Turkey for that matter. So he's decided to directly, and they've actually started to they've sent in jets to bomb northern parts of Syria where these Kurdish YPG are, and do something which is upsetting quite a lot of people. But then he's been upset by certain other countries. Now we all know that we've had this problem, which I guess if you've been following it, was kind of resumed really with the almost wiping out of the ISIS or Daesh, whatever you call them, within Syria, with the help of Turkey. With the help of Russia, Iran, and to a small part, I guess, Hezbollah, Lebanon, and they've pushed them out, and they're pretty much a non-entity now. Although I've heard a few have gone back into Afghanistan, the survivors, or some have been reabsorbed within Syrian freedom fighters, who was against the Assad government within Syria still, probably part of the Kurdish lot as well. Anyway, it's a little bit confusing. We have the Americans who are staying in East Syria, saying they've got to protect their interests, and they're back in the Kurdish side, if you like. The names are slightly different, but in all intents and purposes, they're the same people that Erdogan of Turkey wants out. So we have two NATO countries having a bit of a difference of opinion here. So Erdogan has made the move. So if I read you this article, if that made a lot of sense to you, don't worry, it didn't make a lot of sense to me because it's an ongoing thing and it's hard to keep up with. But anyway, Manbij next says Erdogan has... Sorry, this is a Veterans Today article. I chose Veterans Today because there were several articles. The easiest one to read for me. And I think it's the easiest one to understand, as it's a very complicated issue, to say the least, out there. Anyway, Manbij next, says Erdogan, as Turkey warplanes bomb Syria's Afrin. It says here, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Ankara plans to launch an operation against US-backed Kurdish militants in the northern Syria city of Manbij as Turkish warplanes launch airstrikes on positions of the Kurdish People's Protective Units, the YPJ militia in Syria. The announcement in a televised speech in the city of Kütahya on Saturday after Ankara had started a de facto ground operation in the northwestern border region of Afrin in Syria. The Afrin operation has de facto been started on the ground, said Erdogan, adding, this will be followed by Manbij. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Binali Yildirim said in a televised speech on Saturday that Turkish armed forces have started an air campaign in order to destroy elements of the YPJ. The report said that the Turkish fighters' jets carried out 11 raids on the villages of Dikne, Mariamin, and Tel Rifat Kafri Jana, and Maranaz, and villages in the vicinity of Afrin in the northern countryside of Aleppo. Afrin and Manbij are controlled by the YPJ, which Ankara views as a terror organization and the Syrian branch of the outlawed Kurdish Workers' Party, the PKK. Turkey has in recent days sent dozens of military vehicles and hundreds of troops to the border area over the past 2 days. Turkish forces have been shelling YPG targets around Afrin. Turkey deployed troops to northern Syria in August 2016 without Damascus approval under the pretext of fighting the Takfiri terror group of Daesh. The operation named Euphrates Shield, however, was later seen on the Kurds, whom Turkey associates with anti-Ankara terrorists. The operation ended last March, but Turkey recently redeployed its forces after the US announced a plan to 30,000 strong border security force, including the Kurdish militants near the Turkish border. Washington had already angered Ankara by renegading on its promise of stopping its arms transfers to the Kurds and retrieving the weapons it had already given to them. The promises made to us over Manbij were not kept, so nobody can object if we do what is necessary, said Erdogan, referring to past American assurance that the YPG would move out of Afrin. The Turkish president added that Ankara would step by step destroy a terror corridor that he said had been set up by the YPG. Later, we will step by step clear our country up to the Iraqi border from this terror filth that has tried to besiege our country, said Erdogan. Meanwhile, the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, as a US-backed group of mostly Kurdish militants, on Saturday accused Turkey of using cross-border shelling as a false pretext to launch an offensive in Syria, which controls swathes of North and East Syria, said it would have no choice but to defend itself if attacked. Syria has censured and Turkish plans for a fresh wave of unilateral military operations on its soil. Damascus views such measures as an assault on the country's sovereignty. The Syrian government has also indicated that it would shoot down any Turkish planes entering its skies. It should start with no delay, Turkish defense chief. Turkish Minister Nurettin Canikli says no troops have gone into Syrian Kurdish-controlled Afrin region, but the operation has started de facto with cross-border shelling. Canikli said in an interview with the broadcaster Ahaba Friday that Turkey was developing weapon systems against anti-tank missiles used by US-backed YPG militants. He said the planned military operation in the northwestern Syria region should be carried out to purge the terrorists of what he called terrorist elements. Those intentions with the US. Turkey said Thursday it would seek Russia's approval for the operation as the country's chief of staff Hulusi Akar travelled to Moscow for the negotiations. Prime Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said Akar's trip was part of border efforts by Ankara to coordinate a campaign with Russia. He said the presence of Russian observers in Afrin was an issue that has to be discussed ahead of the operations. When we carry out an intervention, we need to coordinate on this. It should not impact the Russian observers, said Cavusoglu, adding that the coordination will also cover the situation in Idlib region northwest of Syria, where Turkey backs an array of anti-Damascus groups. There's just a little bit more. Washington angered Ankara early this week when it announced the plan to work with US-backed militants of the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, to set up a new 30,000-strong border security force. The force would operate along the Turkish border with Iraq and within Syria along the Euphrates River. Cavusoglu further reiterated Turkish concerns over Kurdish militant activities near its border and said our response to this is our legitimate right to retaliate. We told the United States this. The White House later denied the plan, with Secretary of State Tillerson saying that the issue, which has incensed its NATO ally Ankara, had been misportrayed, misdescribed. Some people misspoke. Turkey said the denial was important, but that it cannot remain silent in the face of any formation which will threaten its borders. Ankara views the Kurdish People's Protection Units, an offshoot of the SDF, a terrorist organisation linked to the homegrown Kurdish Workers' Party, PKK, militant group, which has been fighting for independence inside Turkey. There we are. Wary of the YPG's activities at its doorstep, Turkey has repeatedly called on the US to stop supporting the Kurdish militants and take back the arms it has supplied to them under the pretext of fighting the Daesh terror group. However, Syria has censured both the African Turkey face a wave of unmilitary operations on its soil. Damascus views such measures as assault on the common summit. I just said that. Never mind. There we are. That's about it, really. I'll leave them up to the article. Yes,
I want to commend you on your Turkish pronunciation. Çok güzel.
Yeah, likewise.
I thought I got them all wrong.
No, you did quite well. A lot of people do not know a history of Turkey, and Erdogan is not, even though today modern Turks like him, he is not what people, my generation, people that grew up in the 80s, the Ataturk's years, know and love about Turkey, because Mustafa Kemal Ataturk was one of the forefront founders of modern day Turkey. He brought Turkey into the modern world. Before him, it was the Ottoman Empire. Everything was segregated. You were classified. Imagine it with back in the old 14th century. You had feudal lands. You know, the lot of us probably would be owned by some lord and not have any mind, because that's the way we were raised and taught and forced. That's the way it was before Ataturk, and that's what Erdogan, I can't even say his bloody name, Erdogan, is trying to make it go back. He's trying to force the religion, is trying to force the old traditions, and he's trying to force, the segregation. When I lived in Turkey, there was a lot of Christians. Now Christianity is on the backlash. It's not something that was or is thought or it's not a positive thing to be a Christian. It's better to be Muslim. I don't know how to explain it, but that's the way it is. That's the mentality. As far as the Kurdish people, you have to, if you look at Turkey, Ankara is in the southern central part of Turkey. It's north of Marmaris, if everybody's familiar with that area. But east of that was all Kurdish lands. The Kurds, when I was growing up over there, you didn't go into that area because they were the radicals. They were the Erdogans of the time. But they were extreme. I'm not gonna say they're like ISIS or terrorists or anything, but you know, they stuck to their own, they had their own beliefs. And that was all right. I don't think Erdogan should be messing with them. And another thing, the PKK have been trying to become their own country and their own sect, whatever you want to call it, government thing, since God. I lived in Turkey in '83. Since at least the '60s, they've been trying that. So it's nothing new that they're trying to become their own government thing. But I just wanted to let you know that a little bit of the background of what's going on and the mentality of that man and what Turkey used to and it is fighting to still be. Erdogan is basically the president / dictator of Turkey. And a lot of people don't like him, but it's kind of like North Korea in that sense of if you don't like him, you don't really say because something might happen that you don't want to happen.
Okay, well, it's fair to say that he's an Islamist, is Erdogan, isn't he? And there's alleged involvement with the Muslim Brotherhood, and that sort of thing. So we kind of know that he does want to take it back to its glory days of the Ottoman Empire, which obviously, like you say, ruled for years, a lot of areas for 700 years or more. And he's not shy in his aspirations for Turkey to sort of take a step back that way after like you say, the Ataturk era, which was promoted more of a kind of a secular type country.
Well, Ataturk brought it back into the modern world. He allowed women to not wear the hijab. He allowed other religions. He wanted innovation. He wanted the Western world to come into the country and make the country more exciting. He wanted to have the benefit of the Western world and be a part of it. That's why Turkey is still wanting to be part of Europe, thanks to Ataturk. Well, Erdogan wants the benefits of Europe, but the control of the Ottoman Empire, if that makes sense.
It does, but the only thing that doesn't make any sense is that he wants very similar to what, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, you know, with the Sunni and the Shia type of, not argument, but debate out of the way for the moment, he wants pretty much what Iran have, which is an Islamic republic. I mean, that's what Iran is, isn't it? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I've read so far, or what I perceive. It's Iran is an Islamic republic, and you have a kind of a religious head and a president or whatever. And I think, but Erdogan very much on the other page as regards Iran and especially Syria. The reason why I said phase 2 to this, because I've not really brought it up, is that we know that Erdogan and the American establishment, let's call them that, or deep state, or there's lots of talk about, you know, Trump and the deep state and the military industrial complex, blah, 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 the big corporate heads, whatever. But if we just take that, they both want rid of Assad. Yeah, Erdogan wants Assad gone. And he did actually back a lot of the Daesh and the radicals with the SDF across up until recently with the operation, what do you call it, Shield, of Euphrates Shield and all the rest of it. So at the end of the day, why I think this is phase 2 of regime change for Syria is because I think all the cards are still on the table. They couldn't achieve it in phase 1 because of the Russians and the Iranians and the Hezbollah, etc., etc. And they've got a bit of a bloody nose, really. But they're that's still, I think, in the offing, and the reason why things are now escalating. I don't know whether, nobody knows whether Erdogan is literally doing all this just to get rid of the Kurdish claims to, or trying to establish a state, establish a state within Turkey, or whether there's as far as the EU goes, I don't think Turkey will ever be a member of the EU. I think that's laughable because of the way things are and the way things are going to be. A bit of research about it all, but you never know. We don't know anything.
Here's a modern twist.
Sorry?
Well, here's a modern bit of information. One of my nurses that come to me, her brother-in-law is a Turkish military man. Her sister married a Turkish guy. They live in Turkey, in the southern part of Turkey, near the border of Syria. Now, what kind of wonky-minded Wally takes the passport of all these military people so they can't leave the country? Okay? And then threaten
Yes.
that if they do try to leave, that there would be either death or, you know, major problems. If their families can go and visit, but they must come back, and it's very difficult for their families to go. The only reason my nurse's sister was able to go out of the country, being married to him, was because she was an American, and she was barely allowed to take her children with her because they were afraid that they weren't going to come back. Now, tells you what kind of mental state this man who's in charge is. I mean,
well,
imagine.
I guess you
imagine you being told you can't leave England. It's going to make you want to leave even more, just because you've been told you can't.
Well, because I think you've lived there, so you know firsthand. Even though it was still during the latter stage of the, well, let's be honest, Syria was secular, wasn't it, before all this all started to unleash in 2011. Christians were there and Muslims were there and Buddhists were there, whatever. I mean, it was quite secular,
but
it still is.
It was you have all these different. It was peaceful. Even though you had these little sections of Christians and Jews and Muslims and you know, whatever's pagan, it was still peaceful. You didn't have one person going and saying, you know, giving the two fingers because they're there. You know, now you've got that. And that's why he's fueling. He's fueling more hate. That's what he's doing. He's creating more hate.
And that's the period we're in at the moment, where you've got you know, it's radical. Well, again, we're not talking about overall the people. I guess if you're in the military, like you are here, but it's called taking the Queen's shilling, the Official Secrets Act, and all the rest of it, and you take the oath, then you must, you know, you take the shilling, you must do as you are told in that respect. So I guess really, in some areas of the world where you do that, and if you're a member of the military, you know, if you don't carry out your duty, then the world, you know, it's almost, you know, you're put against the wall and shot, really. But in a way, society, even here in the UK, is, you know, if you take the Queen's shilling and you're ordered to go the seas and to kill somebody, that's what you've got to do. I mean, it's,
yeah, but you're allowed a holiday.
Yes, well, I know. These societies, I mean, you've lived there, and but today you would find it a little bit different if you was to go back there and live there, I would think.
Well, I've done a bit of research. My apartment building, thanks to Google Earth, is a real fancy area. The city I grew up in, Izmir, is now considered the like the Beverly Hills of Turkey. It's rather expensive now, but it was expensive when I grew up there. I mean, I don't know very many people other than my friends that grew up with me there that that grew up with marble floors, had a maid, had 4-bedroom house flat with 2 balconies, and you know, there was lots of luxury. And I'm not saying to be bragging or anything, but that was standard when I was growing up. Now it's even more so in Izmir. And that's scary. It's become very. Pardon?
You know, danger. The big danger I foresee is it's to do with more I think it's, well, I can't help but think that this whole plan of what Turkey's doing somehow is a continuum. Whether the Russians are going along for whatever reason, even Assad, because apparently last week he said if the Turkish Air Force come into the Syrian zone, they'll shoot them down. Well, they've been and done bombing raids, and no Turkish jets were shot down. So whichever game they're all playing out there, I still think at the back of my mind it's going to lead to more destabilization again. And destabilization means that government NGOs around the world can start crying, start shipping people across waters, and immigrants by the ton load into Europe, refugees. And this will cause the same problems it did in 2014, 2015. And it just seems to me like they want to push this continuum flood of millions into Europe out of the Middle East, and mostly from North Africa and the Horn of Africa. And I think they still want to try and pursue, at the end of the day, that's always I might be wrong, but that's the niggle in the back of my mind, that why didn't they finish the job, the Russians, the Iranians, the Syrians, and order America out of that little bit of that safe zones area? Why did they not finish the job and put the utmost pressure on the USA with the few troops that were left? Why did they let them stay and hook in and present these safe zones which is going to lead to this Kurdish corridor of the YPG stroke PKK stroke SDF, whatever they want to call themselves, Al-Nusra, Al-Jam Shamat, whatever. They're all very radical, these people, which means Turkey comes in, starts flowing its weight around, then the Americans will give them more arms, and then it'll spread back out again.
Yeah, you forgot though. Turkey eradicated NATO in their country. They no longer are a member of NATO, the North Alliance Treaty Organization. Turkey got rid of that. America has nothing really to do with Turkey. There is no contract to assist Turkey. We have no bases in Turkey anymore. There was a base in Incirlik, a base. We have us in Izmir. We had a base in Ankara. They are no longer there because they eradicated. Erdogan got rid of NATO because he didn't want other countries telling him what to do in his country. So now he's kicking up dirt with Syria and the Kurds. Oh, that's not a very smart idea now.
No, I don't think so. And you're right. I forgot about the contract that wasn't re-signed or torn up with Incirlik Air Base, and there was some. Well, I don't know whether there was an answer to it, but there was nuclear warheads kept at that base.
So
nobody knows what happened to them.
Honestly, the way I'm looking at this is if Erdogan wants to kick dirt at Syria, and Syria is saying, "Don't kick dirt in my face, you rat bastard." Oh, I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, and Turkey says, "I don't care what you say," and Syria says, "Well, I'll shoot you in your foot." They should shoot them in the foot because they're not really caring what they're not thinking. Really, they haven't got any backers.
Well, I just think the Kurds will probably end up being the fall guys in all this. I know they're tough people and they've been around a long time. And the PKK, like you say, I don't know how many decades it goes back where they've had trouble in Turkey with the PKK, but it's quite a while, isn't it? And I just think that at the end of the day, there just seems that there's behind all this is further destabilization again of Syria. And I can see it getting out of hand again. But the danger is, like you say, if Turkey are still regarded as a NATO member, even though they didn't re-sign the contract or whatever it was, there's a chance here that, if Turkey decides to really push it, Americans, I don't think, are going to do anything directly. But they're going to sit back and wait for Syria to do something, or the Russians to do something, or Iran to do something. And then that will give the Americans carte blanche to pile in, and the whole place will go up, which is what they want. Let's be honest, because they want regime change, and then they want a foothold there to change that over to a more Islamic type republic, in the respect of like Erdogan is. Not so much how the Shia Iranians are, and then they can go from there and into Iran, etc. Which was the 7 countries that Wesley Clark or whatever his name was said that they had planned from the Pentagon to invade, and all the rest years and years ago. I felt the feel at the back of my head that, or my gut feeling is that they're going to try and destabilize the whole area again, because they failed for the past 6 years to do that and take over Syria and put some Muslim Brotherhood dictator in there, basically, to keep it and to progress from there. Turkey could end up in confrontation with Iran, Syria, obviously, maybe Russia, or maybe America. Turkey, America, Russia. I mean, anything could happen, really, once it gets out of control. And that's the danger of it all, isn't it, Lopi, really? Because it's very, It's very complicated.
I don't know any country that would actually be compelled to defend Turkey in that essence, because I know Greece doesn't have much of. Sorry, Greece, you know, I love you and all that, and you make great falafel and all good food and everything, but they don't have that much of a military, you know, and they're the closest country that's not Middle Eastern, because the Middle Eastern countries more than likely are going to back the Kurdish and the people that have the same sort of mentality and tradition.
Well, I think it's all down to Turkey at the moment, how this goes. I think if Turkey overstepped the mark, I think at the end of the day, then things could get out of hand. But I think the ball is definitely in Turkey's court, so to speak. I think Assad is just seeing how they get on with this Afrin area or Manbij. I've heard some reports that had something to do with Manjib. Sorry, not Manbij. Or was it Manjib or Manbij? Manbij. Yeah, Manbij. That if they do decide to, take over that area and that town, then I think Assad or the SAA, as they're called, will do something. But I think I don't know. I don't know what's really going to happen. I guess only a fool would predict what's going to happen, because it's quite complex and we don't know behind the scenes who's controlling who or who's doing what. So, but it's very tricky at the moment. It's not being really reported much. But, I think it's got to be watched. Maybe it might tie in with this, although PJ did show that it's not unusual for a government shutdown in the United States. Maybe it might be something to do with the shutdown. Maybe it might be connected. What's happening on the ground in Syria and what's happening or not happening so much in Congress in America. So who knows? Maybe the two are connected. Maybe we'll see some very severe escalations in Syria. Who knows? But yes, dodgy ground. But I thought you might be interested as well, love. I'm glad you're on tonight because you know the area. You know about Turkey. You've lived there, and I don't know nothing about. I've never lived there, never been to Turkey. So, yeah, I followed obviously because it seems to be the bane of all the problems in the world as regards 9/11 onwards, or perhaps obviously a little bit before then, but the Middle East is racked with problems for 1,500 years, one could say, couldn't they? With the different religions and the different tribes and whatever. So it's very complicated, not easy. Well, I mean, put over PJ. Are you still there, PJ? Have we bored you to tears? You got anything to say about this?
I've been listening in, guys. I've not really got much more to add. I think you've covered the lot. You didn't save much room for me, I'm afraid.
I'm looking at Erdogan's bio, and he was born in Istanbul. And it says, yeah, it's Kurdish issue. It says, how do I do that? Because I'm interested in if he's having problems with the Kurds. This is rather confusing. I don't know how to do it, but here, well, I'll post this, and you could show it.
Yeah, I'll screen share it.
And and you go down to the Kurdish issue.
Okay.
Because he's got a problem with the Kurds, obviously. But it makes, to me,
hang on a minute, let me bring the screen up. Okay. Right, this one here, yeah?
yeah.
Is that it? Or was that the wrong one?
No, just
Okay.
click, go down a little bit. And there was a section there, you see it? Up in that little tabs. Not necessarily tabs, but it was a block. And it said Kurdish issues.
Oh, I get you. Wait a minute. Let's have a look. Oh, yeah. Kurdish issues. There we are. Do you want me to read it? Or can you read it?
All right, I'll read it. In 2009, Prime Minister Erdogan government announced a plan to help end the quarter-century-long Turkey-Kurdistan Workers' Party conflict that had cost more than 40,000 lives. The government's plan, supported by the European Union, allowed the Kurdish language to be used in all broadcast media and political campaigns and restored Kurdish names to cities and towns that had been given Turkish ones. Erdogan said that we took a courageous step to resolve a chronic issue that constitute an obstacle along Turkey's development, progression, and empowerment. Erdogan passed a partial amnesty to reduce penalties faced by many members of the Kurdish guerrilla movement, PKK, who had surrendered to the government. On November 23rd, 2011, during a televised meeting of his party in Ankara, he apologized on behalf of the state of the Dersim massacre that many Alevis and Zazas were killed. Now, if he's got a problem, I mean, I don't understand why a person is trying to coax both sides of the sword. He's accepting the Kurdish language, and yet he wants to eradicate that problem in Syria, you know, because it's on the border of Syria and the Kurdish lands. I just don't understand the mentality of this man. Why he's so angry with them if he's part of the Kurdish? If he, you know what I'm saying? If he's helping them, why are you helping them?
Well, perhaps it's, you know, perhaps it's got something to do with this this guy that's in America who wants to be president of Turkey, Gulen, who the Americans won't release and send back to Turkey, even though Erdogan has asked for him to be to Turkey, and his political party, which I can't remember what it's called. I don't know if he's got any the same issues with the Kurds or not, but yeah, it's obviously not just an Erdogan thing. It's obviously the Kurds are being used by more than one player. Maybe it's not just Erdogan. Like we say, it's very complicated. You know, they will probably be used like they were kind of in Iraq. I mean, because, you know, the Kurds had an area, northern Iraq, wasn't it, where they claimed, etc., and we had the similar problems with the Kurds and that in Iraq. And I don't even know if that issue is ever been resolved or it's still ongoing with the Kurds in Iraq. So it seems to me that Turkey's not, and Syria, it's not just one area in that well, just not one place in that area, where the Kurds are trying to establish a state for themselves. One could say a bit like Israel and the Jews, I guess. How they come about and who are Jews and who are not Jews, I guess. But I don't know, Lopi. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area.
The Kurds have always lived in the desert. That's the thing. That's what, you know, the Turks, they live on the central and the western and southern part of Turkey. And then there's the desert. That is the north and eastern part. In the mountains, Mount Ararat and all that. If you're familiar with the Bible, they say that Noah's Ark is on Mount Ararat. Well, that's Kurdish land. You couldn't go to Mount Ararat when I lived there because, you know, that was all Kurdish land. And you just couldn't do that, unfortunately. But
it goes back, though, doesn't it? It goes back a long, long way. All these issues with all these tribes, Bedouin tribes of people. I think a certain country called Libya had all of these problems long before this chap called Gaddafi came in, who actually could. I mean, there was always warring with each other of Libya, and along came this guy, and whether he was put there by Western powers or not, it doesn't matter, whichever. Same with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. He did actually bring them all together and, in a way, you know, stopped all the warring and fighting. Although a lot of people say that he killed a lot of people as well, you know, and all the rest of it. But
some people say he was
everything seems to
a god. He was. Some people swear that he did a lot of good as well.
Well, Gaddafi, well, he did, I suppose, if you look at the facts on the ground with his Green Book rule and with, you know, they were given farms if they wanted. They given the agricultural equipment was free. They had free national health in a way, and if they couldn't do the operation, they sent any of their citizens anywhere in the world to get an operation done, all for free. They paid about, I don't know, 1 cent or 10 cents per gallon for oil. He irrigated the whole area so that everybody had water with his underground reservoir system and whatever. Apparently, a lot of people say that he's, you know, to be in Libya, he was far better than any Western world. You had far more freedom, you had a lot more things, and you lived a much better quality of life. I've read such articles on the internet, and then it'd be difficult to argue against that. But we all know that you know, this wasn't about that. I think, you know, he wanted to trade his oil in a gold dinar is one of the big problems that the West didn't want him to have. He wanted Rothschild Bank, complete hegemony over Libya, and there's a lot of other reasons why. The big kicker was that he wanted to introduce his own gold dinar and sell his oil for gold, and of course that's a big threat to the petrodollar and the Saudi regime and the American petrodollar system. So, you know, one can do these things and then draw one's own conclusion, really. So I guess I don't think you know, Syria's a slightly different you know, circumstances, although they have oil, but it's not like the amount that Libya had. And then we got this pipeline business with Iran wanting to come through, and the Saudis don't want them to, you know, pump oil and gas all the way to the Europe through Turkey or through the Mediterranean basin or up around the top, you know, as well, which is a geopolitical war and situation. So there's a lot in that tiny little area. that's very complicated, and everybody's looking after their own interests, and I guess even the United States for that matter. So, and UK and Europe, the EU, everything. It's everybody seems to be involved, but it's always the poor people on the ground that get the blunt end of all the problems, isn't it? Like everything. So I don't know. We just have to watch it, Lopi, and see how it all goes. What alternative do we have? You know. But I think it should be watched. And
Yeah,
should be
unfortunately, I don't want another war on our hands where everybody is involved in it, like the Desert Storm in Afghanistan again. Don't want that to happen.
No, they're using proxies, aren't they, at the moment? Even the Turks are using the SDF proxies in northern Syria to take over these areas, or from the Kurds. So you've got the radicals on the Free Syria Army, FSA, which were Daesh and all these other factions, which were supplied and trained by Turkey, and they're still there, and they're going to use them to invade the Kurdish areas. Americans with the YPG stroke SDF, Syrian Defence Force, but they're really Kurds on the other side of the coin, defending these areas in the east of the Euphrates. Then you've got Russia in there, you've got Iran in there, you've got Hezbollah in there, you've got obviously Syria. I mean, it's going to be at the least, but the only one that's not using proxy, well, I guess Syria are using Russia to help them, and Russia are using Syria, and Iran are using Syria, and Syria are using Iran. So I mean, it's yeah, I just fear that this whole thing's going to escalate after all this 4 or 5 years of fighting against the radicals, or they call them moderate rebels, which was a bit of a joke when you really looked into what was going on. But it's all going to break out again and destabilize Syria, which has not been destroyed enough, has it? You know, and of course all the other complex problems that come from it. Like I say, the refugees flooding across the Mediterranean again and stuff. So I can't help but feel that there's the agenda behind it is the same agenda as it was in 2011. Nothing's changed. I hope it has, but we'll have to wait and see. Lopi, right?
Yeah, well, that's all we'll be able to do.
Okay, doke. Well, I don't know if there's any more to add from that. PJ, you got anything more to add?
No, other than Syrian armies just recently took over 2 towns in Aleppo. So that's breaking news, not too long ago. Apart from that, I think you've covered it all. I was struggling to contribute to that part, as you'd pretty much covered it quite perfectly.
I can get going. I can rabbit, can't I, when I get going? I'm sorry about that. I just, yeah, well, you could spend a whole night talking about it and what ifs and who's behind that and whatever, can't you? But that's interesting. I think there's still, above all that, there's still enclaves and areas where there's still these moderate rebels still trying to do their own thing, as well as the rest of this Kurdish thing, and the Tiger forces of the Iranians, I think it was, no, the Syrian Tiger forces are still clearing out areas from Daesh or ISIS, whatever you call them, and then we've got Israel, and then, you know, that's a whole extended topic of it, and we won't go there, but I think we're about finished for the moment. But I think we'll be revisiting this.
Yeah, we always do. We've been covering this for quite you know, a number of years now. So we've no doubts on returning to this, which is the sad part, you know, and the many millions that have had to suffer for it.
Yes, suffer indeed. It's not the word. It's really it's. I'll tell you, just you know, it's you can't say, well, let's bang some heads together because it's been going on for decades and centuries and centuries, and only more recently with the Western world involved since you know the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the British involvement and all the rest of it. But anyway, yeah, we'd certainly all be revisiting it. So if you've got nothing else, Lopi or Patti, I think, has been very busy. So let's
yeah, there's a little bit of feedback when Lopi tries to speak as well coming through you. So yeah, I think we'll wrap it up then, Stav.
Okay, well, Jeff missed out. I'm sure he would have added a lot more, and it would have been that interesting to hear. So maybe he'll be on a revisit because I think like I say, we'll be revisiting this pretty soon. And yeah, and other things that are connected to it because there's a lot of other things that's going to spill out of this. I'm sure. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's just a skirmish and Turkey go. We've done what we wanted to do, and the Americans say, well, we're going home now because we've got no more interest in the Middle East. And it's all going to calm down and everything's going to go back to a nice secular world. No, I'll dream on, Lopi, shall I? Okay, cheers and beers. Thanks for coming on, and we'll do it again next week on another topic, I'm sure.
Cheers guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.